Hello and welcome to Dressmaking Amore. Today I'm happy to share with you how to sew this absolutely charming gathered, ruched and shirred dress. The Rosetta dress flows on the body with gentle gathers all throughout. The extra long ties at the shoulder hold the bodice up, which has a lovingly shaped and gathered bust that meets the gathered A-line skirt through princess seams. The dress is finished with side seam pockets and with a super comfortable no closure method, a beautiful shirred center back. We'll be using my Rosetta dress PDF sewing pattern, so to follow along, get yours at the link below in the description. Here are the materials you'll need. And please refer to your instructional booklet that comes with your pattern to choose your right size and print and assemble the pattern perfectly. And of course, all the steps for the whole sewing process of this dress are in there. I'm using a peach skin fabric here. I love it because it doesn't wrinkle, so caring for the dress after you've made it is super easy, and of course the fabric drapes beautifully. And I went with a thin cotton for the lining. And so our pattern pieces are the center bust front, side bust front, gathering front, center front, side front, shirring back, and the straps for the skirt front, skirt back, and the pocket. Okay, let's get to sewing. First, we need to prep our skirt pieces, so take a 2 to 2.5 centimeter or an inch wide strip of interfacing and place it over the pocket opening marks so that it's 2 centimeters farther at each end than the marks. Fuse it to the wrong side of both skirt front pieces. Taking the front pattern pieces 1 and 2, the center bust front and the side bust front, and we're going to pin the princess seams. We have notches at the center, and across from it here's a notch at the curved edge, which is the side of the cup. Always marking the wrong side of the fabric if it's not easy to tell at a glance. Pin these two pieces right sides together at the bust marks first so that we don't mix anything up. Then pin the rest, and sew with 1.2 centimeter seam allowances. Then taking pattern pieces 4 and 5, pin them right sides together as well, and here's what it should look like. And so, go slow and steady, smoothly rounding it out at the curve, and maintain even seam allowances. Press the princess seams flat and then press them open, or to one side if you prefer it that way. And you want to split this so that you can press from each side to maintain the curve. And then press it from the right side. And this will be much easier to do with a round bra hem. In the same way, sew and press the lining pieces. Now we need to trim the seam allowances of the bust in half so that they lay flatter. And here in this curvy area, I'll make 3 to 4 clips, just like this. Repeat for the main fabric pieces. Now make a stay stitch at the bottom edge of the bust underlining piece from mark to mark, and also make a stay stitch at the bottom half of the bodice, also from mark to mark. And then make the same stitching on the lining pieces. The seam allowance for the stay stitch is 1 centimeter, so just a bit smaller than our main seams. On piece 3, place a gathering stitch 5 millimeters wide at the top and the bottom edges from mark to mark. And then placing it on top of the bust piece that is laying right side up to you, so wrong side to right side, pin at the side marks and center marks. Make sure that your corners are matching. And then pull at the bottom thread to gather the top edge evenly from mark to mark. just like this. This way we'll only have the gathering distributed through the center of the bust, and then the same thing to the bottom edge. Pin the gathering in place. Here's what we have. It'll lay beautifully on the body while having the perfect amount of gathering. Go ahead and stitch everything together along the top and bottom edge. Press the seam allowances so they will be flat and be easily sewed to the bodice. And now at the center, make a visible mark like this. Taking the bottom half of the bodice after we place the stay stitch, make clips at the seam allowances of the curves of our piece here. And now we're going to pin the gathering bust and bottom half of the bodice right sides together, of course matching the princess seams, centers, and side marks. And because we clipped the fabric, it lays smoothly, and now we can sew. In the same way, pin the lining pieces, matching the seams precisely. And sew. As you can see, we have the gathering from seam to seam here. Now we need to press the seam allowances as they are to flatten them. And then press them either towards the cup or towards the bodice. This is your preference here. I'm going to press them inside into the cup. You're going to want to use your manual to set up your serging machine, but I'll be using only one needle for a rolled hem, set to 6 here and 8 with the needle on regular. Now take your strap piece and starting from the edge with the angle, finish the edge. You can also do a baby hem here instead. And for now, leave the angled edges raw. Fold one edge up, right sides together, and pin. Then mark 7.5 centimeters or 3 inches out from the raw angled edges and sew only that part. Now stepping away from the end of the seam, about 2 centimeters, let's trim the seam allowances to half. And then turn the strap out to the right side. Smooth it out and press the sewed edges. And in the same way, prep all of your straps. Now with your straps and your bodice in front of you, mark the seam allowances of 1.2 centimeters away from the edge at the armhole and pin the strap right next to that mark, right sides together with the bodice. The seam on the strap is facing out towards the side seams so that it won't be visible. Now that the straps are sewn at the front, take your lining and right sides together with the bodice pinned together at the top edge. Match the edges, corners, and seams. And sew in place. At the corners, you want to sew at a V for a sharp and secure point. And now we come to an important step. We need to stabilize our neckline. So with the lining side up, place an organza strip or a see-through stay tape right over the stitch and sew it following the previous seam as a guide. While we're sewing, we pull the strip towards ourselves and slightly push the fabric underneath forwards, away from you as you go. This is not to make any gathering, we're just doing this to strengthen the neckline and make it fit beautifully at the bust area. At the point, make a back stitch. It should look like this. The waviness that you see is a sign of the shrunk fabric under our seam. And then do the same thing at the next part of our bust. Turning the seam allowances towards the lining, understitch the lining as far as you can, and then repeat from the other side. After sewing and understitching the lining, you can check if you like how the straps are sewn in a continuous line at the sides. And from the wrong side, trim the seam allowances in half, leaving about 5 millimeters. Make a few clips at the center front seam allowances so that everything will turn out nicely. And you want to fold the corners towards the lining for a sharp, even edge. And now press the neckline edge. The main fabric should be visible from the lining side by just a few millimeters. Cool down with the tailor's clapper to create flat edges. Here's our center back. The shorter edge is the bottom, and the longer edge is the top. We need to finish the top edge of the back piece, folding it towards the wrong side by 5 to 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch and edge stitching. Just like this. Now trim the seam allowances close to the seam, and turn that seam again to the wrong side and edge stitch, trying to match right into our previous seam. Pull the thread behind the machine to help yourself out. With the right side facing up, we're going to make our lines for shirring. Using a ruler, make marks starting 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch away from the top edge, 1 to 1.5 centimeters apart from each other. Keep in mind that for different sizes, there will be a different amount of lines. The bottom line should be 2.5 to 3 centimeters or an inch up away from the waistline. Now wind the elastic by hand or by machine onto the bobbin, stretching it as you do so that it'll have tension. Set your stitch width from 3.5 to 5 on your machine, and first testing on a scrap piece of fabric, sew from the right side, holding the fabric at both ends as you sew. Pull out a fair amount before cutting it so we can additionally gather it later. Now the thread I'm using is very thin, so if your fabric is on the thicker side, I'd recommend using a thicker thread so it'll hold the fabric better and will stretch more. Now sew through all of your marked lines without any backstitching, holding the fabric at both ends. Here's what our shirred back looks like on the right side, and here's the wrong side. At one side seam, pull the threads and tighten them into knots like this, and trim off the excess. Now that we tied the knots on one side, we can repeat the same at the other side seam after we measured the width at the top and bottom of the piece, making sure they're the same as the gathering information on the paper pattern piece number 6. If needed, you can pull the elastic to make it tighter, but don't overdo it. Then we can bring all the threads to the wrong side and tie knots. After making all the knots at the sides, we can place a straight seam at both vertical sides to secure those knots. Make sure that you're catching the knots so that they're behind the stay stitch. And the length of the stay stitch is 2 to 2.5 millimeters, and so with our regular 1.2 centimeter seam allowances. Here's what it looks like. Place the back and front right sides together and pin the side seam only to the main fabric, not the lining. You can sew here, or what I'll do is bring the lining over the shirred back piece and pin it to the side seams as well, so it looks like this. With 1.2 centimeter seam allowances, sew the side seams, making sure everything is smooth on the inside. The lining sticks out at the end about 5 millimeters, and sew the other side. At the top, there should be a smooth transition, no knots should be visible, and check the other side as well. At this step, you want to try the bodice on and pin the bra cups in place between the lining and the dress so that they sit exactly where you want them to sit. After checking the fit of the cups, flip over to the wrong side and making sure they're even with each other, sew the cups to the seam allowances at the top and bottom with a few hand stitches. Lay the bodice down and pin the underbust, and then true, which means even out, the waistline to trim the excess lining. Then join together the lining and the main fabric at the waistline and stay stitch them. On the wrong side of the skirt front, mark the pocket opening guideline. Make the first mark 5 centimeters, 2 inches, down from the waistline edge, and the next mark 15 centimeters or 6 inches down. Then draw out 1.2 centimeters or half an inch from the side edge and connect the two marks vertically. Then turn the skirt to the right side and clip at the marks so that you can see the pocket opening from this side. Place the pocket pieces right sides together with the skirt, and if the pocket opening is 5 centimeters or 2 inches from the top, the pocket edge will be 3 centimeters or 1 inch away from the top. Stitch following the guideline, making back stitching at both ends, and then cut the seam allowances, leaving 2 to 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch. Make clips at the corners like this, coming up just about 1 millimeter from the seam, so that our corner will be sharp like this. If it doesn't turn out as neatly, snip a bit further. Now turn the pockets to the right side and press for a pretty pocket opening. Top stitch the pocket opening 1 to 2 millimeters or 1/16 of an inch from the edge, making sure to create sharp and even corners. Now press and cool down with a clapper. And then with the skirt laying wrong side up, place the pocket lining over, right sides together, and pin so that nothing moves. Flip the fabric away and pin the edges of the pocket lining together just as they lay naturally. Once we sewed and serged the edge of the pocket, press. Place the front and back skirt pieces right sides together and pin the side seams. Sew the side seams, and then serge. After, press the seam allowances towards the back. It's a good idea to take the pins holding your pocket in place out only after you press. Pin the center back seam of the skirt right sides together and sew and serge and press. Now we need to place a 5mm gathering stitch at the top edge of the waistline, starting and ending at the marks on the back skirt panel. Then flip the skirt to the wrong side and place the bodice inside the skirt right sides together. Match the center front marks of the skirt and bodice, then the side mark on the bodice with the side seams of the skirt front, and the center back marks of the bodice with the center back seam of the skirt. Pin in between, distributing the distance, and pull the gathering stitch thread to gather the front skirt between the pins to match the length of the bodice front. Pin in place. And sew the waistline seam. Pin the lining skirt, side seams, and center back seam. Sew, serge, and press. And in the same way as the main fabric, place a gathering stitch 5mm wide at the waistline, starting and ending at the marks on the back skirt lining panel. Take your dress and place the lining skirt inside the dress, and pin it right sides together, matching the center back, side seams, and center front. Gather the lining front to match the front waistline seam, and then sew the waistline seam. Hem the dress with your favorite method. For this one I used a rolled seam with my serger, and for the lining I double folded and sewed. Now try the dress on and choose the best placement for the straps at the back for you personally. Here they are 5 cm or 2 inches away from the seams at the back, and sew them in place. And giving your garment a finishing press like always, we are done with our darling Rosetta dress. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this inspires you to sew this beautiful piece yourself. I know you'll love it. You can get the PDF downloadable sewing pattern that I used below at the link in the description of this video, and happy sewing!